Now it's the Senate's turn. I'm Ed Kelly, editor of the Oklahoman. With me from Washington is Chris Castile, chief of the Oklahoman's Washington Bureau and a frequent contributor here on News OK TV. Chris, you know better than anybody, it's a big night ahead in Congress with the Senate expected to cast its own vote on the so-called bailout bill. This one, at least in another form, failed Monday in the House. What's expected to happen in the Senate?
Well, it is as risky as it is to predict anything that might go on up here, especially after Monday's vote. It looks like the Senate will pass this bill tonight, maybe even overwhelmingly. At least, you know, they're going to get a bigger percentage of the Republicans in the Senate voting for this package than the House Republicans did on Monday. The Senate, some of the most fiscally conservative members of the Senate, people like Jed Gregg, Lamar Alexander, even perhaps Tom Coburn of Oklahoma, have been on board with this thing, at least in concept from the beginning, not necessarily the plan that was first brought to them, but the need for it. And in the Senate, you know, only a third of them are up for election every 2 years. You know, not much unlike the House, where every single one of those House members that's running for re-election is on the ballot in a month. Just a third of the senators are. So there's been less political pressure on them because of that. And in fact, Oklahoma Congressman Tom Cole said earlier this week, in fact, right after the House vote, that he really thinks the Senate probably should have gone first on this in the first place, since there was more broad bipartisan support. It would have given the bill some momentum, given the House members longer to look at it and discuss it with their constituents. So it does look at, like tonight, that the Senate will give pretty a healthy margin of victory for this.
Chris, you mentioned Senator Coburn. How do you expect him and his colleague from Oklahoma, Jim Inhofe, to vote on this bill?
Well, at this moment, I expect them to split on it. Senator Inhofe, who is up for re-election, by the way, in a month, is leaning strongly against this. He has from the beginning, and none of the revisions that have been made either over the weekend or in the last couple of days, even adding the tax extenders, the tax breaks that are important to Oklahoma, seem to have swayed him. We'll see. Senator Coburn, I think that he's going to vote for it. He has really made some sobering comments about the financial crisis that he sees the country in. He blames a lot of it on Congress, but I think that he feels like something has to be done right now, as fast as possible, to make sure that the economic problems the country is experiencing now don't get worse. So here you have a senator, arguably the most fiscally conservative senator in the Senate. He will stop a bill, as you know, that spends $500,000, and he may be about to vote for a $700 billion package. But again, you know, a lot of the senators today argued again. There's a Congressional Budget Office report that the government actually may wind up making money off this. So I do think they'll probably split on it at this point.
Okay. Let's talk again about the House. Do you think there'll be another vote later this week, and does it stand a better chance of passage?
Yes and yes. I think that there's an urgency up here. You know, it's palpable. It has been for obviously over a week now. And the House is coming back tomorrow, and they'll take this Senate bill and maybe take it up tomorrow, maybe Friday, before they finally get a vote on it. But, you know, as shocking as that vote was on Monday, it really still was pretty narrow. There are only 12 people that have to flip on this thing, and there have been things added to this bill, the raising the FDIC insurance limits, the SEC modifying the so-called mark-to-market accounting rules that many of the Republicans call. And the tenor of the calls has changed to these House members. It's not like they're getting an overwhelming majority saying pass this thing now, but they're getting more people, including the business leaders back in their districts, who have joined in the lobbying on this, saying we need this. So I do think it'll wind up passing in the House. You know, a combination of the changes that they've made and kind of the switch in public tenor over this.
Okay, Chris, thank you. Well done. Stay here on News OK for more coverage of this continuing story.